Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about the Baby C and the chip dump. Two different profiles, very closely related. But now a lot of people, I put a video on yesterday about Baby C, and yeah, you don't get a real positive reaction. Some people even sort of said I was pulling their leg. But you see, this is a whole problem. There's no evidence. Even on the internet, you can do a search for Baby C or chip dump, and you really won't find much. You can even type in, if you were to type in Oregon back in 1982 used to make Super 70, and it looked a little bit like a bit of a Baby C or a chip dump. But if you Google that, you won't find it. So there's a lot of things that you can't find about chainsaws, because unless you typed in vintage chainsaws, and it might show you some of the vintage chainsaws from Stihl or some of the other companies. Even here in Australia, we actually did make our own chainsaws at one stage, but it didn't last that long. So it's very hard to get good information, even though the internet is big as what it is. It's not like a building where people take photographs of it. So, who's going to take a photograph of a chain? It's not that interesting. So it's very difficult to find good information. So the other thing is, and I'll just briefly touch on that, I've got a book here, and it dates back to 1991. And it's a bit battered. It's called The Stihl Bar and Chains. And it shows you the different... Now we're talking 1991, so we're talking 33 years. Up the top, you've got Rapid Standard, Rapid Micro, Rapid Super, Rapid Super L Cutter. Looks a little bit like a square grind on the shoulder there, so that's a little bit different. Turn the page over, and we've got Topic Super Cutter, Pico Micro Cutter, so that's a different one. And interesting, when you go right to the start on the 404 chain, this looks like the Cox chipper chain. We could zoom in there and have a bit of a look at that. Look at that. You don't see anything like that these days, so this is typically... But yeah, this is my era. Even before, I was playing around with chainsaws in the 70s. So even this looks a bit different when you look at that one there. Pico Micro Cutter. And even when you look at the safety chains back then, it looks a bit different. You can see the safety chain there. A very interesting book. It's probably about 30 pages in size. Anyway, that's be nice if you could still buy those. But anyway, I don't know if there's any ones after that or before that. But anyway, I was lucky that came into my hands. Anyway, back to the Baby C and the chip dump. Now, when do you use Baby C and when would you use the chip dump? Well, you certainly don't use it on a brand new chain. But as your chain wears down, because of the taper of the tooth, it gets smaller as we get down near the end of life. So when we're getting down to that stage, the final stages of the chain, when you've only got about 4 or 5 sharpenings left, sometimes it doesn't cut really well. That's because if you're using a constant flat depth gauge, it won't cut well, because the attack angle will be all wrong. And we've mentioned this. If you use this type of gauge to the end of the life, like this chain, we'll have a good look at this in a minute, you're only going to get an attack angle of about 3.5. You really want a progressive depth gauge like this, so you're maintaining attack angle of at least 5. Now, this chain, there's not much left on it. It looks like little tiny triangles, but believe me, it's got Baby C on it, and it cuts unbelievable. The chip clearance on there, there's not much of the tooth left. I retired the chain because I file them right back to the witness mark, but filing it back to the witness mark, all as you left is with little triangles, and we'll have a good look at the Baby C. Now, the Baby C is done with a 4mm file, so we've got a 4mm file on here. Sorry, a 3 point. This is 3.2mm file on the Baby C. The chip dump has a 4mm file and extends down to the side plate a bit more. So this is a standard 5.2 or 5mm file. In the blue, in the red, that'll be chip dump. Now we're going to zoom in there, and hopefully you can get this file out of the way, and hopefully we'll bring the camera down at the right level and you can see the Baby C. It looks like it's a bit of a racehorse type chain. And believe me, you'd be surprised how this cuts. So there it is there. And as you can see, if you look closely, the chain just fits in there like that. So that's a 3.2mm file. And as you can see, it still sticks above the top of the tooth. So that's what that is. And if you look side on, you get really side on. We'll just sort of drop down a little bit there. We can sort of slide that tooth through. Now, for those that laugh at Baby C and chip dump, that's, yeah, look, that's getting close to chip dump because the C shape is extending below. I'll see if I can use the pointer. When we're talking Baby C, we're talking about the C shape just being within this flat section of the side plate. But this is extending down a little bit. So it's sort of, yeah, look, it's very close, but it is filed with a 3.2mm file. So it does fall into the category of Baby C. Chip dump will sort of be a little bit bigger than that. But certainly you're not going to put a 5.5mm file in this. This is a 3/8 standard chain from Still. So, yeah, that's Baby C. And if you pull it along, you'll see other little ones there. Bit more of a hook on that. Now, this was done on a grinder, on a 3.2mm wheel. And I just ran the file over that other one so that you could see the Baby C, because at that time, when I was playing around with all these chains and the Baby C and the chip dump, I never had this file FG2. So it was a little bit difficult. If you're using the file, you got to make sure that you're keeping the file slightly above. If you've got a 3.2mm file, it's got to sit a little bit above the tooth to get the proper Baby C. The chip dump will be a little bit bigger than this. I do have a 4mm file, that's it there. And if you put it in, you can see it. Look, it doesn't fit really good. You can see that, can't you? You see that gap. So that's my standard 4mm file. That's it there. Don't know whether you can read that, actually. See whether you can. Nah, you can't even, you'll never read that, I don't think. Oh, yeah, hang on. 532, there it is. I think you can read that. Huh. Yeah, there it is. 5 up the top. You can, yeah. 532, you could just barely make it out. But yeah, that's the 4mm file. So if I use a 4mm file, it will be chip dump. Okay, so what's the difference between chip dump and Baby C? It's called chip dump because it evacuates the chips really good. It dumps them out much better than Baby C because it goes down to the side plate a little bit more. Now, I can tell you right now, this was done on a progressive depth gauge. And being on a progressive depth gauge, you may not be able to see it, but that raker is about 1.2 millimeters lower than the tooth. This chain is a racehorse. It'll cut through timber like you wouldn't believe, because you've got an enormous amount of space for chip evacuation and you've got this little tiny tooth on there. So that's baby C and that's chip dump, and it's best done on a chain that's probably 70% of its life. This has come to the end of its life. This chain is retired. I don't use it, but it's great to show people. I'll just see whether we'll zoom back out there. And I'm pretty sure there's missing teeth on here. We'll just see whether we can see that. So what starts to happen when you file the teeth that small, they start breaking off. A lot of people don't take their chains down to this level, but I always make sure they actually, surprisingly enough, they cut better than what you may think. So this one doesn't appear. While I'm talking, I'm still looking to see if there's a broken tooth on there. I thought there was, but I can't even see one. So I've got a few of these chains laying around. So there is one with a broken tooth, and normally what happens, as soon as I break a tooth on it, that's it. I'm retiring it. So, but even if you have a close look at it, all you're going to see, we'll see whether you can see it, a little tiny triangle. That's all you'll see. There's another one there. Look at that little triangle near my thumb. So, to briefly sum up, and we look at the top left-hand corner, here's a clear picture that I found on the internet floating around. You got baby C and chip dump. And if you have a close look, you'll see the difference. Now, as I said before, a lot of people think that it's a waste of time, but I can tell you that once your chain wears down like that, it definitely will work better using a 4mm file for chip dump and baby C 3.2, 3.5mm file. If you buy the still files, they'll be 3.2mm files. Some of the aftermarket ones are 3.5mm. So either one, and it's really good to use either the Gramberg or this Still FG2, or there are an Oregon type one, I think, that's out there. There's quite a few out there on the market. They all work equally as good as each other, provided they're high quality like the Still. Just avoid the El Cheapos that don't work that good. And that's virtually it for chip dump and baby C. So again, thanks for watching. But hang on, wait a minute. I do have one tooth. Yes, I'll show you that. I've got an Oregon Super 70 from 1982. Hopefully you can see that. That's up in the top left-hand corner. I'll just leave that there. Look, it's very difficult to try and get these pictures. It really is, because most people aren't posting them. Most people probably don't even know about the baby C. They probably heard about it. And most people probably never heard of the chip dump. So, but a lot of us old cockies that have been around for a while, we may not have called it that. And even on the Still, going back the Rapid Super many, many years ago, and I'll just put that picture back up. If you look closely, you may be able to see the profile on the side plate. It is different. It is not a full C. So I think this was early Rapid Super, going back, could have been 1990s or something like that there. And even today, they're bringing out chain, and an example is Husqvarna's X-Cut, and it's got a little sharp beak on it. Now, if you put a file in that, you'll destroy the beak. So This is the same with the baby C or the chip dump. It's best done. Now, you can actually do it on a grinder if you dress the wheel correctly, because you can get a 3.2 millimeter wheel and you can put a radius of 4 mil on that wheel, depends how you dress it. So you can use a grinder to do chip dump or baby C, and believe me, it works like a racehorse when the chain is worn down to about 70%, getting towards the end of life. Don't do this on a brand new chain because there'll be no advantage, but there is certainly a great advantage on an old used chain coming towards the ends of its life. And make sure that you're using a progressive depth gauge like that, whether it's Husqvarna or whether it's Still. This type of gauge won't give you good results getting towards the end of life. The cutting performance will be terrible because of the attack angle will only be about 3.5 degrees at best. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.